Good morning. Happy to bring back to the program Joe DiGenova, legal analyst and former U.S. attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Hey, so when we last talked to you, we were finding out developments about how the Inspector General was looking into James Comey's memos and how he was keeping them and the extent to which they were classified. But also, we now know at least two of the memos that James Comey gave to his friend contained information that the government now considers classified. Additionally, I heard him talk to a New York Times reporter over the weekend in which James Comey said that his practice was to go home, write up his memos on his computer, print them out, 2 copies, put one in his personal safe and bring one to the FBI, meaning that information the government now considers classified was retained inside of James Comey's home in his personal safe. Does any of that sound illegal to you?
Just about all of it. But let's go back to where we started this, which is the James Comey memos. 15 pages. This is a 15-page suicide note written by Mr. Comey. Apropos of the contents is this wonderful sentence. Actually, it's several. This is what he told the president, according to Mr. Comey. Quote, "I don't do sneaky things. I don't leak. I don't do weasel moves." End quote. I must say, that is one of the most revealing group of sentences ever written by a public official. And let's remember that the person who wrote it at the time was the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. These are the notes of a child, an adolescent. When you read them in their totality, putting aside the classified information, they are childish. They are revelatory in the sense that they show a troubled mind, a person so consumed by his own self-importance that everything else fades by comparison. I don't think there's any doubt that there's classified information in the memos, and the reason we know that is because when you look at them, they have large portions that are blacked out. And that's done because there's classified information in them. Mr. Comey broke the law, and if the little sailor who took photographs on his submarine gets a year in prison, I think the former FBI director should as well. I don't think there's any doubt he broke the law. That
portion where you're talking about how he denies ever doing weasel moves, in that memo, that very paragraph, he's talking to the president about the extent to which the FBI leaks, denies that he would personally do something like that. And then the following quote, Trump replied that he needed loyalty and expected loyalty. The conversation was explicitly about leaks. This is the first time we're seeing this in public.
Yes, this is what Comey did. He went out publicly and basically lied about his own memos and what they meant. Actually, when you look at the fact that he wrote down things that shows that he's lying, you wonder what his brain was doing. As I read these, I remembered what the Nazis did at the extermination camps. They kept all these meticulous records about how they killed the Jews, which were used against them at Nuremberg. I call these the Comey Nuremberg memos. He basically tells you that he lied to the President of the United States in his own. I don't know if he realizes what he did, but I think the man has such a screwed up head that he's not there. It's all about him.
Yeah, Joe, I wanted to ask you, the president tweeted out about these memos, says James Comey illegally leaked classified documents to the press in order to generate a special counsel. Therefore, the special counsel was established based on an illegal act. So you have that, and you have Nunes yesterday saying that his review of the FBI and Justice Department electronic communication documents shows no intelligence was used to begin the investigation into this possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. The more we learn, the more we're finding out that there was no basis to this investigation anyway, that it was done to basically discredit the president. Everything that comes out of this then, is any of this legal? Can any of this stick then?
Well, the issue of whether or not Mueller was legally appointed is an interesting question. I don't think he was. I think when Rod Rosenstein issued that memorandum appointing him, he does not cite a crime. In fact, he doesn't say that it's a criminal investigation. He calls it's a counterintelligence investigation. So I don't think there's any doubt that the original sin here is Rod Rosenstein's memo illegally creating the special counsel's office. However, whether or not a court will throw that out remains to be seen. It's a very, very high hurdle for a defendant to be able to do that. But politically, This establishes beyond any doubt that what Rod Rosenstein did was to do one thing, cover his fanny. He didn't want to deal with this. He didn't want responsibility for the decisions that the department would have to make investigating all of this. So he took the coward's way out, and he appointed a special counsel. But apropos of that when you go back and you look, remember, President Trump he's president-elect in January. Comey goes up to visit him on January 6th and to brief him on the so-called dossier. And what's interesting about this, and this relates, Mary, to what you just said, it was James Clapper's idea that Comey go up and brief the president, but only tell him the dirty stuff that's in the salacious part of the memo. Why did he do that? Because CNN, per Clapper, was looking for a news hook to write about the dossier, and he didn't have one. So what was the hook? Comey briefs president-elect on salacious memo, and then they published it. Mm-hmm. When you think of Clapper doing this with Comey, and Comey agreeing to do it to harm the incoming president, when you think of Comey going to New York purposely to do that, to get a story written, you see what a tawdry human being James Comey is and how fundamentally dishonest he is as a public servant. I can tell you this from my conversations with people at FBI headquarters. They are embarrassed there. They are angry there. They don't want him ever back in the building, and they wish that he would go away. But he's not going away. He's going to hang around and do more damage to the FBI. He is nothing more than a disgrace.
And more with Joe DiGenova in just a moment. I want to ask him more about that news hook conversation as well. Hold tight. Joe's going to be with us in a second. First, talking to Joe DiGenova, legal analyst and former U.S. attorney to the District of Columbia and a good guest of the show. Always enlightens us. Joe, in the memos about that first meeting with James Comey and the President of the United States, when they're alone and he's briefing them on the existence of this dossier, or at least the allegations contained within, about prostitutes, James Comey himself says media like CNN had them, meaning the reports, and were looking for a news hook. So James Comey says out loud to the president, by his own admission, that CNN needs a news hook to go with this. Can you explain what he's thinking here? I realize you think that he's kind of deranged, but I don't understand why he would admit that he's a part of a scheme by saying they need a news hook, and then that meeting becomes the hook.
Well, I think you have to understand what happens when somebody in that position, just picture yourself being the FBI director, the power that goes with that position. Unassailable power. Nobody ever questions your authority. You go places, people open doors. You know things that very few people know, secrets of the republic. And then he meets with the incoming president, whom he despises, and he loses it. And he writes things down that no one in their right mind would write down, because they impugn him, not President Trump, when all is said and done. That is a troubled mind. Someone who is delusional, who thinks that no one will ever know how they behave, or if they do, they will agree with them. This is a guy who, when all is said and done, remains no longer a puzzlement at all. This is a guy who is tortured and troubled in his mind. And when you watch him on television, your skin kind of crawls. He's kind of creepy, and his unctuousness is unbelievable. And even some of the liberal people who are interviewing can't quite believe they're hearing what they're hearing as he describes his own intimate feelings, not about somebody else, but about himself. He's talking about himself, and they're the weirdest comments you would ever want to see coming from a man. By the way, men don't talk the way he talks about all their feelings and how awful he is and how put upon. Those are not the thoughts of a man. They're the thoughts of some strange animal from another planet.
Or a woman. Devin Nunes...
I wouldn't insult women that way.
That's true. Devin Nunes yesterday also said that he is now investigating the State Department to find out how information made its way from the State Department to the FBI. We know Sidney Blumenthal was actively giving information, but trying to find out if Hillary Clinton was pulling the strings and finding out how, information about George Papadopoulos, for instance, was obtained by the FBI. Do you know anything about this?
Well, I think the pedigree of all the flow of information into the FBI from the White House, from the National Security Council, from Ben Rhodes and Susan Rice, is something that will require further investigation. I'm not sure that it rises to the level of criminality, but it does rise to the level of being part of a puzzle about how all this information was created. Because we do know that remember, the most important thing here is, how did the FISA warrants get issued? What was the information that was used? Was it credible? Was it verified? Did it have substantial basis? And of course, we now know that it did not. We know that information was hidden from the court, and all of that information probably started somewhere outside of the Justice Department. We know Fusion GPS was generating it through Christopher Steele. Some of it went to the State Department and found its way back to the FBI and to Main Justice through Bruce Orr and others. You see, the total picture remains just as it has evolved over time, that false information was actually created by the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign through Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele, and funneled its way into a very, very secret court, which has a vital role in our democracy, the FISA court. People are beginning to forget the origins of this, but you have to go back to basics. This was a plot, ladies and gentlemen, and it worked. But one thing happened. Hillary didn't get elected, and it all fell apart.
No, she didn't. Joe DiGenova, meanwhile, talks to us every week, and we really appreciate it, Joe.
You bet.
All your insights, sir.